Well, I like making food that tastes good, and I don't even mind making food that tastes bad. But if I had to choose, I think I'd pick the former. So if you want to know how to make it a little bit better, but maybe not quite as good as it maybe could be, I think that you should listen to what I'm talking about. And if you learn a little something from this, well, I hope it served a purpose, and hey, that's what we're here for. Cook better. Nailed it. Woo! Hello, and welcome to the Cook Better podcast. I am Corey, and today we are going to be talking about one of the most exciting things in the world. And you probably read the headline, but it's rice. We're talking about rice. And I know that sounds ridiculous because if you're anything like me, the thought of rice does not bring up the thought of anything exciting. It's rice. And growing up, I only really had just plain white rice, and it was kind of to set their other food on or as a filler. But rice is really, it's really a integral part of a lot of different cuisines. I think it's one of the, well, it's maybe not one of the few things, but it's definitely, it's in every cuisine, right? Chinese cooking or Asian cooking, I shouldn't say Chinese, but Asian cooking in general, there's a lot of rice, and that includes Indian food. Mexican food has a lot of rice. It's just everywhere. And what I really like about rice is, and maybe I wrongly use it as this, but it's something that I use as kind of like, I don't know what else to have with, I've got a meat, I've got a vegetable, I need a starch of some kind, so it's either rice or potatoes. And the beautiful thing about rice is you can buy a big old bag of it, and it will last me a long time. And it stays in the cupboard. Potatoes, sometimes I've come back to them, and they are growing shoots of green flying in the air, and yeah, they're just trash. So, let's get into it. Rice, according to the Google search, there's argument of whether it kind of originated from China or India, but regardless, it's in the Asian cooking, and it's obviously a big staple of Asian cooking. Sushi, which is, a short grain, more of a sticky rice, and that's usually what my rice for a long time would turn out to be, is sticky rice. No matter what type of rice I was cooking, short grain, long grain, didn't matter. It was all sticky white rice. And the big part of that is I never had a rice cooker. I still to this day have never used a rice cooker. I know a lot of people do and really like them. I just have never done it. I've got way too many kitchen appliances, especially if you ask my wife, and a rice cooker is just one I've never bought. But I think I have rice with dinner, we probably 2-3 times a week at minimum. And so I make a lot of rice, but for many years, I went in, I always have to read the back. I still have to read the back of the bag. It drives me nuts. I should know this by now. I've made rice 100 times, probably way more than 100 times. And I still have to read the back. It's kind of a 2 to 1 ratio, if I remember correctly, depending on what you're going for. But I never really realized that the amount of water, it seems silly now thinking about it, but the amount of water that you add will determine the texture of the rice that comes out as a finished product. And so I would do 1 cup of rice and 2 cups of water, or whatever the back of the bag says, and follow it to the exact to the T. You'd bring it to a boil, let it simmer, then turn the heat down, or depending on the rice. It never really was an instant rice, but some things will just tell you turn the heat off and let it sit until all the water's absorbed. So that's what I would do. And I would get sticky white rice and wonder why in the world everybody, I don't know. I just use it as a filler. I didn't know why people really like rice so much. But I go to a restaurant and, you get a dish, and especially I love Mexican food. But even just the rice that comes with, you got your, whatever your protein is or your other protein, your chicken or burrito, tacos, whatever, it always comes with a side of beans, refried beans, and rice. And I could drove me nuts because I could take my spoon, dip it in the rice, and tip my spoon or fork and watch individual grains fall down, but it's still warm and it's still got a tomato-y flavor-ish, or a little cumin or whatever. And how in the world is this rice not all sticking together? And I always wondered that, but never really dug into it. But now trying to learn how to cook better over these years, and I'm making more authentic Mexican dishes or Indian making some curries or something, or there's a halal chicken. I've really been getting into. I love Middle Eastern food. I like the flavors that are in it, and so all those have the rice doesn't stick together. So I had to learn why that is. And I'm still not, I kind of know a little bit of the techniques on how to keep it from sticking together. I say that. I know a little bit of the technique. I don't exactly know why it works, but it does for certain things. And maybe we can look it up while I'm running my mouth here. But one of the big things is how much water you put in with the rice, to a certain extent, determines how stuck together the rice will be. I think if you've all ever cooked rice, sometimes you'll take the pot and you turn it upside down, and it's it doesn't matter if you stirred it. It's like a glue, and it comes out as a big, like a sandcastle on a beach, like a dumping a bucket of sand full of water and just plop right down. And a lot of that can be just the amount of water that's added. And the other part to it that I learned and I've been doing recently is rinsing your rice. Now, that might seem obvious to somebody who grew up eating rice all the time, or from a culture that uses a lot of rice. But I didn't know that. And that makes a big difference as far as the texture of the rice and everything. So you rinse your rice, and you rinse it until the water runs clear. I've got one of those little mesh, I can't think of the name now, but it's the same. It's a real fine mesh strainer that what you would use for, sometimes I'll put powdered sugar in it and tap it against my hand to dust desserts with, to sprinkle a little powdered sugar or whatever. It's just that real fine mesh strainer, and I put rice in there, even if you're just doing a cup. Take it, dump the cup of dry rice in there, and rinse it for a few minutes. Sometimes I've taken it and you take the strainer, just let it sit in water so that the rice is just kind of soaking in water. Move it around a little bit, lift it up, dump the water out, put clean water in, or you rinse it until the water runs clear. So, and that apparently that kind of takes the grains and gets rid of any excess starch, and that's a big part of keeping the grains separate. Apparently, for whatever reason, that excess starch on the outside, and I don't know how it gets on the outside or why it seems like, they'd have rinsed it already, but whatever. But if you don't do that, it's going to stick together. The starch, something in science has to do with it, makes it stick together if you don't rinse it. So start with that. If you don't want your rice to stick together, rinse your rice. And I learned that way too late in life, but that's a big part of it. So that helps. Now you got white rice that's not stuck together, and that you can take your fork or your spoon or whatever you use to mix your rice after it's done cooking and mix it up, and everything's not just one big solid clump. And so that was kind of step one for me is realizing that, hey, rinse your rice. And that makes a big difference. Now, my favorite rice at the moment, I like jasmine rice. I like long grain rice. I use rice more as a side dish, like I had said in the beginning from in Mexican food, doing like a rice and that has some tomato in it and whatnot. But with anything, I use it more as a side dish. Sometimes if I'm making like a burrito or something like that, it'll go in with whatever protein I've got with chicken or beef or whatever, and beans. But a lot of times it's on the side, and so. All right, sweet. I was glad about that. I figured out how to get it to not stick together. And then maybe I guess it wouldn't be adding, maybe subtract a little bit of the water from what the back of the package says. If it says like a 2-to-1 ratio, you got 1 cup of dried rice and 2 cups of water. Maybe add a cup and a half and see. It can be kind of tricky because you don't want to end up with like rice sitting on top that's dried out that didn't get any moisture in it, and you got some crunchy, chewy stuff. But even just taking maybe not even a full half cup, maybe take a quarter cup out. That can make some difference too, because if you don't have rice sitting at the bottom water sitting at the bottom, then obviously your rice is going to be a little drier when you don't have as much water. So maybe try that. And then I guess I don't really have a linear plan for rice, but I guess another part to making rice taste better or cooking rice better is changing the liquid can change the flavor a little bit. And rice, and I always think of rice kind of like tofu, where it seems to take a lot of flavor to make the rice taste like what you're trying to flavor it with. And I think tofu can be that way too. It always drives me nuts because, you go to the grocery store and you buy these Knorr, or however you pronounce it, the rice packets that are like cheese and broccoli or garlic, whatever rice. And they always smell so good too when you're cooking them and you're dumping all that seasoning in, and then you take a bite of it and it's like, man, this doesn't even taste. I can smell it a little bit. It smells great, but the flavor is just not there, And so, but doing that is a multi-step process. But chicken stock is kind of my go-to instead of water. And adding the liquid is kind of the last step when I make rice. That might sound goofy, but hopefully I'll explain better as we go on. But adding a beef stock or a chicken stock, or even a watered down tomato juice, if you're doing like a Spanish rice type of situation, can really change the flavor at the end. Because obviously water is going to dilute the flavors that you've added prior to adding the water. If you're going for a white rice, obviously just water, and the rice tastes like white rice. But I've been big in the basmati rice lately. I think I started to say that, but I trailed off. But I love jasmine rice for a while. I like long grain rice, and basmati rice is used a lot in Middle Eastern, like Indian cooking, I believe. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, which is going to happen a lot. But something about that basmati rice, it's a really, really good long grain rice, and I like it a lot. And because I decided I like that a lot, I think I got a 25-pound bag. I think that's the bag I got. So it was, even if you don't like it as much, it's too bad because you got to use it up. But and it lasts a while. And that's the beautiful thing about rice is it's cheap, So anyway, we have the water, rinsing the rice. Step number one, and run it till it's clear. That's going to help it from sticking together. I jumped ahead to the different type of liquid, but before that, another thing that I've tried and that somebody turned me on to was a YouTube video, I believe, that I watched, and they said to cook your rice in a fat before you add your liquid to coat that rice. And I've been doing that, and it does add a lot. And you can get a toasty flavor on the rice. That changes the texture a little bit. It can end up being more, I guess crunchy is maybe the technical term, technically, but that's if you let it brown for a long time. But basically all you're going to do is either use an olive oil, which is kind of typically what I would go with, or a butter, or maybe a combination of both. Everybody does the flavor of butter. You get some unsalted butter and put that in with the olive oil. And then a key thing is to then take some type of aromatic and like onion, mince up some onion, dice it really small, and then some garlic. Definitely need garlic and onion. I mean, they go with everything. And if you saute them in that oil, get that going. A little salt to help with the softening of the onion, and just add a little bit of flavor of seasoning. And then depending on what you're making, you kind of obviously you do your oil, get that shimmering, put in your onion, get that kind of translucent. And this is where you want to watch the heat. Then you add the garlic. If garlic is in there and it's really hot, it's burning. And you don't want to burn or brown your onion, and you definitely don't want to brown your garlic. It gets a bitter flavor if you do that. So you want to cook that medium heat, medium low. Give it the time. Let it do its thing. Let the onions get translucent. Then you add in your garlic. Keep that soft. Don't want it to burn. Crispy chunks of garlic. Mince that really fine. And then depending on the cuisine you're going with, you add spices. Get that oil infused with different spices. Middle Eastern, like I said, I've been getting into that a lot. There's a halal chicken that'll make a lot that has that'll do a rice with it, and it's got turmeric and a couple other staples of Middle Eastern. You'll have cinnamon and clove and coriander, and you can put that in there, and maybe some black pepper or whatever even sounds good. But especially though, any spices, you put that in there and let you bloom those spices. Let it get cooking, and you'll start to, after about 5 seconds of dumping the spices in and stirring the mixture around, you're going to start to smell all of a sudden all that stuff like cranks up to 100 from, it's like you stuffed your nose in the bottle of seasoning. So you just start to smell that, and that's infusing all that oil with all those flavors. So you do that, you let that cook down, and it only needs to be for a few minutes. And then once that's done, now you've got a flavored oil. Your onions are soft. Your garlic's been infused in there. That's soft too. Nothing's burnt. We keep an eye on the temperature and the heat of the pan, and then you put the rice in there dry. As dry as it is. You just rinsed it. We're dumping the rice into that pan with that oil and with all those spices in the onion, and stir it around. And what we're doing is we're getting those grains of rice coated with that oil, with that fat, with the butter or whatever is in there. And I don't know why that it still absorbs the water. You're getting fat molecules all wrapped around all the individual grains. You want to make sure to stir it good, get everything coated. And then once that's done, then you put your water or your stock in and cover it you know, get the water or stock boiling, reduce the heat, and let it sit for like 15 minutes or whatever, shut off the heat, let it absorb. And there's something that happens. I don't know if it's that the oil or the whatever fat you have with all the spices, that's now the flavors that you heated up and infused into that oil are now, I guess think of it as coating each individual grain of rice. So now you've got that flavor that was able to get around all that rice and kind of stick to it prior to adding the liquid. And somehow that flavor sticks to it, and doesn't just like dissipate and disappear. That's what seems to happen with those packaged rice packets that you get at the packaged rice packets. Yes, that you get at the store. You got your water in there. Okay, dump your water in now. Dump your packet over top of the water and mix it all together. And for some reason, adding flavor to water doesn't. It gives a little bit of flavor, but not the full. You don't get the full effect of it. And so, try that. Try that with the oil. And it's, as far as quantities, I'm not very good. And I know some of my family and friends, it drives them nuts when they ask for a recipe. And I go, well, I am more of a, here's the ingredients you might want to use, but change it up if you feel like it. And quantities, don't ask me about quantities because it changes every single time. But the more you practice cooking, the more you'll be able to know, and just by looking, if you've got too much. But the oil, it all depends on how much rice you're making. 1 tablespoon of olive oil and a couple teaspoons of whatever spice isn't going to work if you're doing 4 cups of rice. That's not going to be nearly enough. So it's a trial and error thing, and adjust as needed. I don't ever get anything right the first time, but you learn what quantities you need. The biggest one that I still make the mistake on from time to time, just ask my wife. She's very nice, but salt is, every step of the process needs a little bit of salt, a little bit of seasoning, and I have ruined many dishes by adding too much salt. It's something you can't come back from, but it's still it's something that is necessary to season at every step. It's just watching how much you use. But anyway, one thing I forgot about that rice that I was just talking about. After the rice is completely cooked, I will take some lemon. It's all cooked. It's ready to be served. Cut a lemon in half. Squeeze the lemon. Get the juice on there of half a lemon or a full lemon if you really like. If you like the lemon flavor, cardamom. Yes, coriander is cilantro. Cardamom has which is one of the spices in like Middle Eastern, has a lemony flavor to it. Yeah, but that fresh lemon, that acid at the end, just kind of freshens it. Seems weird. It's one of those things where, and if you don't have a lemon, you don't have a lemon. Who cares? And if you're short on one of the spices, it doesn't matter. Unless somebody's paying you to make the food, who cares if one item or 2 items is missing? Use what you got. That I always try to stock my pantry so that I can make almost whatever recipe comes to mind. But hey, even when you've got a normal stock item from your cupboard, sometimes you run out and you haven't gotten a new bottle yet or whatever. So, but that fresh lemon, that just makes a big difference right at the end. And it adds a freshness. But sometimes I don't have a fresh lemon unless I know I'm going to be making it. I always have a bottle of lemon juice sitting in the door of the fridge. That will work too. It's not quite the same, but it still tastes great, and it's better than not having it at all. So use what you have. If you plan ahead, I'm not always good at that. I fly by the seat of my pants a lot, but if you got it, great. use it, and too with like Spanish rice, I've gone way too far with my attempts at making Spanish rice. I like to try to make stuff without really. Sometimes I'll look at a recipe and kind of use it as a general guideline. People that have like thousands of 4 or 5 star votes on Pinterest. Yes, I'm a man with a Pinterest account that is all food. But if you're, I'll see a recipe, and obviously thousands of people have liked and loved the recipe the way that person wrote it, and I'm like, I got to change something. I don't like just following somebody's. It doesn't feel like it's me making it if I follow somebody's recipe to the T. That doesn't work all the time in baking. Baking, you got to be a little more strict with your quantities and everything. But in cooking, which is why I love cooking, you can be a little liberal with the quantity, or you change the whatever, add something, take something away. Don't like that, get out of here. But anyway. That's a long way to say that I have screwed up. I think Spanish rice is the one thing that I've screwed up more than I've gotten right. And it's because I always want that tomato flavor to come through. And even at restaurants, sometimes it's just kind of like it's a reddish tint to the rice, but I'm not tasting tomato. And so I've done your basic, any long grain rice or whatever is usually what I'll use. And I'll use some of the same method. You strain it, or rinse the rice rather, and get rid of that starch so that the grains separate. I've tried like a tomato puree in with it, and I've tried taking tomato soup, canned like Campbell's tomato soup, or usually an off-brand, and I'll dump that in and then added some chicken stock. I always lean towards chicken stock rather than water. It just has just that little bit of extra flavor. And so I'll dump some of that in there just to get a little more fluid. And I've had it's something about a tomato soup. This might seem obvious to some people, and I'm sure there's people shaking their heads like, what in the world is this idiot doing? But I don't know if it's the texture or the thickness of the tomato soup. Then the liquid in there does not really absorb well into the rice. But I've had a lot of like gooey piles of rice, I guess, because it doesn't really. Who'd have thought dumping a can of tomato soup or a part of a can isn't going to fully absorb, and you're going to end up with like a tomato rice soup with crunchy grain in it. And then I've tried homemade tomatoes or homegrown tomatoes, cut or out of the can even. There's some really good canned tomato options, even and chopping them up and adding them in, or doing diced tomatoes and dumping that in there. And I kind of landed on doing the same process I said with infusing in oil. If I'm doing a Spanish rice, I will still use onion and garlic. I think that's the base. Onion, garlic, oil, maybe like a tablespoon of butter in there to get a little butter flavor in the fat. And then, but I'll add cumin and paprika, and I like a little spice, so I'll add some chili powder, which I don't think is ever spicy, but it just adds a little bit. I said paprika, like a smoked paprika. Bloom those spices, okay, or whatever the cuisine is. Take the base flavors that they would typically be in authentic to that cuisine. For Spanish rice, that's some of the flavors, and then a coriander was just cilantro, maybe some coriander seed or something like that, and infuse that rice, or infuse that oil. Dump the dry rice in there, coat that rice completely, mix it all good, and then dump a chicken stock over it. Like I said, I use a chicken stock. Get that to right at the very end, and then I'll take like some diced tomatoes. If I have some that are fresh, I'll chop up some fresh tomatoes, Roma tomato, whatever it is. Cherry tomatoes, for that matter, would work. Dice them all up. Some people are not happy with that, but whatever you got, that's what I'm all about. I'm out here trying to cook with whatever I've got in the pantry. So, so anyway, dice it up, throw it in there, mix it up. Now you've got some whole fresh tomatoes in there. You got little bites of, and you've got some, not a lot of the tomato flavor in the liquid, but you've got some of the base flavors in like Mexican cooking with the cumin and the coriander and or cilantro. And then with the rice and with anything, a fresh herb garnish or dusting at the end is always just like same with the lemon with that other rice is just adds a little at the end of freshness that tastes so good. Oregano, like a Mexican oregano, I'm thinking, or cilantro. Obviously, I love cilantro. I feel bad for the people that tastes like soap because I put fresh cilantro on everything. But put that on the rice, put it on top. That just adds so much at the end. And cilantro is cheap. I've tried growing it. I've tried growing a lot of things. I'm not a good grower. I've learned that the hard way many times, and I think probably next year too I will do better, and I won't, and it'll be a waste of money. But I always get some cilantro when I get groceries. I like get some green onion, and for that the rice I was talking about with more of the Middle Eastern flavors, that'll get some parsley and get some of that in there as a garnish on top of the rice, and just having that fresh herb. You bite into it, and the taste is there. It's a different texture. It's a leafy texture. You get the smell from any of the herbs when you crush them, especially, basil's a big, you crush basil and it just, the smell just exudes out of the leaf. And so fresh herbs are a must. I say a must. If you can get them, get them. If you don't have them, no big deal. Use dried cilantro. I've got a big tub also. I try to get fresh cilantro all the time, but I also have a big tub from like a Sam's Club, Costco sized tub of dried cilantro, and I put that on quesadillas. I put that on everything too, and sometimes I use dried, sometimes fresh. Fresh is always my go-to, but if I run out or I burned it all up 2 nights before when I made tacos, guess what? It's the dried is good. It's just fresh is best. But yeah, so that's kind of season per the cuisine that you're going for, and then you get into some Asian flavors. There's a lot of like Indian and in Chinese. There's a Chinese like 5-spice blend that I bought of some seasonings, and I tend to steer away. I don't know. I get weird about certain things. I don't trust like a company mixing the right ratios of the 5 Asian spices together. I think, I don't know. I get goofy on that. I'd rather buy them all myself and do whatever ratios I like and combinations I like better. But anyway, that's just a weird thing that I've got going on in my head. So, but like Chinese 5-spice, that's, it's got, what does it have? It's got star anise, cloves, cinnamon. Cloves and cinnamon are big in, like I said, in some Middle Eastern cuisines. Peppercorns, fennel seeds. Fennel's another a strong flavor. So you can buy these, and then big one for Chinese. If I'm making like more of a Chinese or an Asian flavored, I'll use garlic, but I'll also get ginger. Sometimes I have fresh ginger. I don't make Asian food quite as often, so I definitely have like ginger, the powder, and I know that can be more stronger when it's in like a dried powder form. But I try to, if I'm planning ahead, I'll get fresh ginger, get the root from the store, and then trick to that, scrape the skin off with the back of a spoon. Works awesome. But then dice that up, and then you'll have the onion, the ginger, and the garlic. And to me, when you smell that ginger, cooking in a pan. That's like an immediate, oh yeah, this is an Asian food. And then you get the cinnamon and clove or whatever. It's so good together with that Chinese 5-spice. But I like to mix my proportions the way I like to mix them. So I don't know always how authentic I'm making food. Obviously, I don't know if the way I described the Spanish rice is at all Spanish rice technically, but you just kind of taste the flavor profiles that you're going for, and maybe do a little digging on the cuisines and what's normally kind of in there. I know people that don't like clove. I love clove. I think pumpkin spice kind of ruined some of those flavors for people. When you smell clove and cinnamon and nutmeg, and you go, man, I don't want my food to taste like pumpkin pie. And that's, the pumpkin pie spice has got all that in it, but they just work so well together. And I don't know if I'd describe those in a way. They have a sweet smell, but often in food you get I don't know if they're sweet tasting, but the sweet and the savory together is always a win for me. I love that. And the clove and cinnamon are not sweet flavors, but maybe they are in my brain. But I think at least in the way for me growing up, anything with cinnamon was always a sweet food. I never had the food with cinnamon in it that was a savory dish. Cinnamon was like, I only think of elephant ears, deep fried dough with cinnamon and sugar on it, or cinnamon applesauce, or cinnamon applesauce or something like that. It was always kind of a sweet desserty, if desserty's a word, desserty type food. But it's used a lot in other parts of the world, and I love learning about other parts of the world and how they use different ingredients. And I've never been to these places, so it's interesting to me to try some of this food and just get I guess as close to a feel for the culture as I can be without actually being there. So I try to make things as authentic as I can. At least the first time I try to do it, the way it, and then if I don't really like it, I might change something. But in my mind, for some weird reason, it's a little, I like to keep it authentic. It's important to me. I always feel like there's somebody standing over my shoulder like, no, that's not going to be the right way to do it. I wouldn't have done that. You get Italian food, and there's times I now, and my wife's the opposite, but I don't break the spaghetti noodles in half when I put them in the pot of water. My wife will. I used to all the time, and I don't know why. I've never tasted a difference in flavor of breaking the noodles in half, but I know from all the years of all the cooking shows and the videos that I've seen and books I've read, and you do not break the spaghetti noodles in half, because Italian people don't do that, and it's like some sort of crime if you do. I don't get it. I don't know why. It doesn't make a difference in my mind, but I do that at home. Like there's an Italian grandma standing behind me that's going to smack me if I do it, and she ain't there. So I don't know. I try to do things as authentically as I can, but if I don't like it, then the next time I'll change it. I'll do it, and that's where we're adjusting. The reason I don't like pre-made seasonings or pre-mixed seasoning bottles is because I might like a little bit more clove than, or whatever, a little more cinnamon than what's called, or a little less. And when they're all mixed together, I can't take the clove out or add the cinnamon because I don't know how to sort little grains of powder. Anyway, so that's that. Try to do it authentic. I think there's a reason that tradition has been around for so long, is because it's good and it works. So I at least want to try it, and I want to stick to authentic way of cooking as much as I can. Another way of rice is fried rice. I love fried rice. I don't make it as much as I should, and I don't know why, because it is such a good meal. That rice is filling. You can get away with having just a little bit of protein, whatever you're doing, shrimp fried rice, chicken fried rice, and doing it right, you can get there's just a real complex flavors that you can have in a fried rice. I've done when I first started cooking, I'd just make rice, and then it was really sad, and I'm sorry if there's somebody listening that's like Asian or Chinese. This was not good, but just basically make white rice and have soy sauce, and then maybe take a bag of frozen peas and carrots and dump that together, mix it all up, and I'd have a sticky mess that was terrible. And I will say, growing up, my mom made a really good fried rice, chicken fried rice. We had that. I don't know how often she cooked it. It's probably less often than I envision it or thinking back, but it was always really good with the egg and everything. And I tried that, and I know you got to make a little hole in the middle with the fried rice, and then you can whisk up the egg. And I do it, and it turned into this brick, mainly because of one, like we talked about before, not rinsing the rice, so everything's stick together, but also using fresh rice. There's something about, or with fried rice, you need to let it sit overnight. You want to use leftover rice. If you know you're going to have fried rice, the best option is to cook the rice the night before, put it in the fridge, and then get it the next night for dinner or whatever, take it out, and then cook with it from there. I have also done it in a pinch where fried rice sounded really good. I didn't make it the night before. Make the rice. As soon as it's done, put it in the freezer and let it get cool. It's not perfect. It's definitely better to sit overnight in the refrigerator and uncovered. You want that liquid or that water moisture to I don't know if things evaporate in the cold, but if you cover it, we've all had like containers of food that you pull it off and there's condensation on the lid or on the plastic wrap on the top. So you want to let it on a sheet pan, like a cookie sheet, spread the rice out. It's okay if it gets dry. We're going to fry it the next day. We're good. Okay, so you do that. You've got a white rice. You've done that, and then get that in the pan with an oil or something. And if I'm doing a fried rice, I like to use sesame oil. There's something about the smell and the flavor of sesame oil, and that's more authentic again, but it also just has a nutty, that sesame seed has just a really good flavor. And sesame oil, I believe, has a pretty high smoke or a low smoke point, or so it doesn't take much heat for it to start burning. So it's a good finishing oil. A little drizzle at the very end is really good. I would recommend that. But I like to get a little bit of the sesame oil in with a vegetable oil, or maybe even an olive oil. I don't really use olive oil in the fried rices, but a vegetable oil or canola oil, just a neutral oil. And get that rice moving around and start heating that up. And then we'll put some soy sauce in there. That gives it a little bit of color. It starts to coat, you get the grains coated. You start out with a white rice, and then slowly you're getting a tan. This is something where I've added too much soy sauce before, and then I get some salty chunks of soy sauce, basically, because I've added way too much. That sounds kind of nasty, but and this is all how this is probably not the authentic way to make fried rice, but I like it. And using these flavors, you're going to get some good results. So doing that. So, okay, we got our rice, we get a little bit of soy sauce in there, and maybe there's nothing wrong with adding like frozen peas and carrots. If you want a little bit of vegetable in there, I would have cooked the chicken prior to putting it in the fried rice, but frozen vegetables are good. especially fresh vegetables are good, but a lot of the frozen stuff, they like flash freeze that stuff. So it really is, depending on where you're buying your quote unquote fresh vegetables from, it's going to be better quality, because if you're buying peas that were produced in California and you live in Indiana, it's going to take a week or two for them to get to you. And in the meantime, if they're not frozen, they're fresh. They're usually picked a little under ripened or whatever, and because they ripen a little bit more during transit, and then you're getting so. Sometimes frozen is picked at peak freshness, and it's going to be a better product. So nothing wrong with frozen, and it's cheaper, and you can ease in. It lasts forever, and you can just grab it when you need it. So it's handy. I would definitely do frozen over canned. Canned gets mushy, and we've all had canned vegetables, and they are soft and mushy, and they will not take to the constant movement in a pan or in a wok. I do have a wok. I only use it when I do Asian cooking. It sounds, and I don't know why in my mind, and I don't mean to, that's all I use the wok for. It's just one of those things where I like, it's a great pan. You got a lot of food in there. It's moving around. It's a deep pan. It handles a lot of, takes heat well, and it just works well for that. Again, it's like, this is, I don't know. That's what they use in Asia. That's what I should use, right? It would work in a whatever pan you have. You don't have to have a wok. It just makes me feel better about being more authentic to the cuisine I'm cooking. But anyway, so we've got our rice, we've got our vegetables, whatever vegetables those would be. I like garlic, I like a little bit of ginger. I don't like the ginger in fried rice for some reason. I don't want that to come through a lot. Maybe I just add a little bit. I found rice wine vinegar. If you never had it, it's a vinegar. I like vinegars. It's kind of a weird thing to say because I like every food. But a vinegar is an acid, and it's going to add just a little bit more of that Asian cuisine flavor that you're used to tasting. And so I'll put a little bit of that in some soy sauce. And acid can taste salty. So you have to be careful when you're doing soy sauce, rice wine vinegar, and then I really, really like oyster sauce. Not much of it. It's another salty thing. So you've got a lot of sodium being added. So you have to be careful on how much you do. Try a little bit, add a little bit at a time. But if you've never tried oyster sauce, I highly recommend oyster sauce. It's a thicker sauce. Soy sauce is like, it's fermented soy, but it's like obviously it's the thickness of water, it seems like anyway. And rice wine vinegar is the same way. It's a very thin liquid that is easily pourable, but the oyster sauce has some of the same flavors as a soy sauce does, but it's almost got a little more sweetness into it, but it's thicker. It's like the viscosity of ketchup. But it's really good, and it's good with just chicken, or if you're or with beef or any Asian cooking. That oyster sauce goes really well, and I don't think that's whatever. I keep saying it's not authentic, and it's not. I grew up in Michigan, and I don't know authentic, but but some of these authentic flavors are they just go well together and just taste good to me. So I'm going to do it. And, but then add your chicken or your shrimp or whatever you're doing, or just doing a vegetable fried rice. You don't have any of that meat in there, or fish. Or shrimp, not fish. I've never had a fish fried rice. That sounds disgusting. But you get all these things integrated. You want to get the flavor of the soy sauce or the oyster sauce and the rice wine vinegar, or rice vinegar, all around the chicken or the shrimp or whatever. And then the cracking the egg, the doing the thing. Now, if you've cooked the rice and it's day-old rice and it's not something you made 20 minutes before, it's not going to all be stuck together. Make a well in the middle, whip it up like you would with a scrambled egg. Dump it in the middle and just keep mixing it in that well, and it's going to start to harden up, and you're basically just making a scrambled egg. And then once the egg's hardened or, got to the right texture, mix it all in. And now we've got our rice, our vegetables, whatever that might be, peas, carrots, onion, garlic, some ginger, and we've got our egg, we've got our chicken. And it's pretty much there. The big thing that I've found, again, with the fried rice especially, is adding scallions. I like to cut some up and throw a little scallion, green onion in with the fried rice. But then also have it fresh as a garnish on top. That end of that fresh flavor, it just does something. Having that fresh vegetable at the very end. So I'd give it a try. Adjust flavors, adjust seasonings, do whatever makes sense to you. Try it, might like it. And season it with a little sesame oil at the end. Drizzle a little sesame oil over the top. So anyway, those are just 3 types of rice, roughly 3 kind of different cuisines that I really like. That Middle Eastern, that with the turmeric and the clove and the cinnamon, and that's really good with a chicken that you season with the same. Eat it with a chicken that you've like marinated in yogurt, and then you get and then maybe top it. I like to top it with a that they'll do. It's not ranch, but it's similar in texture and season. It's like a mix between a tzatziki sauce and a ranch. That's got some anyway, I'll go into that at a different time, but drizzle that over the top of the rice, and then have some fresh tomato and cucumber on top of the rice, and then you're eating that with your chicken. Or do like the Spanish rice, have it with your Mexican food or whatever, and then or try the fried rice, and even just using some of those Asian flavors and spices and cooking it in that method where we take that oil and infuse it with those flavors, coat the rice grains, and then put our liquid on top. It just infuses so much more flavor into the rice. And just try it. I strongly suggest, if you've never cooked rice that way, to just give it a try. And you might screw it up at the first time. You might do great. And it was an eye-opening thing for me. It just added so much flavor and changed my opinion on rice. As rice went from a filler food and a side dish and something that I ate because I was like, I didn't have enough chicken. I better fill up myself with steak or with rice because the chicken's gone or whatever, to, oh man, I'm looking forward to this bite of rice. And I think that's the key, is with any food that we're making, I love to have, I don't like it when something on the plate is like, I guess I might as well eat this. I don't like it, I can't throw it away. I want everything, every part of my plate to be something, a bite that I look forward to. So that's just a little bit of what I've learned with rice, a little bit of the journey I had. I've burned a lot of rice. If you have the heat too high when it's supposed to be just, when they say turn the heat down, it's very important that you do turn the heat down, or you get burnt, crusty rice on the bottom. But it's just rice is very versatile, and it's in a way like chicken or like tofu or like so many other things, where it's going to take on whatever flavor you put into it. And so if you're not one for a crazy amount of, or you don't have a ton of stuff, just try doing a little bit and see how it goes. Anything's worth trying. Rice is like a blank canvas. Just paint it however you want to paint it. And I will say that my kid's favorite way to paint it, and mine when I was a kid, was taking white rice, and I'll end with this. Rice is going to be a fantastic dessert type food too. There's rice pudding, and there's all these other there's things like that. But even just taking white rice, put a little butter on it, and a little brown sugar. And that is a dessert right there, and it tastes good. And every time we have rice, if it's white rice, my kids are like, Dad, can we put brown sugar? You have to eat a little bit of it the way it is. And then maybe if you finish that, you may have some with the brown sugar and butter. But rice is a great side dish. I'm glad that I'm now to the point where even if I consider it a side dish, which is most of the time what it is, at least for me, it's not something like, I guess I got to have rice. Now I can flavor it. I can make it taste like something good. So let me know if you've done something with rice that kind of opened your eyes, or somebody said something or whatever, something I haven't mentioned. Email me at cookbetter. Nope, sorry, it's not Cook Better Podcast. It's cookbetter@gmail.com. And let me know what you've learned, and or some tips that you have that I could share with other people too. Anything is always helpful, and I know I've got much to learn. I'm just started to crack the code on what is rice, and I like it now. I'm all about it. I'm here for it. So I hope that this helps somebody. That's the goal. And if nothing else, now you know some of the mistakes I've made, and I think I've made them all, and I'm there with you. Do what you can. Try your best, and hey, fail. There's nothing wrong with that. Make some mistakes. It's all right. We all do it, and it's the only way to learn. So thanks for listening. Get out there, make some food, and cook better.